Okay, so now I have a generic basic structure for a vulnerability scanner. Not only that, but I also have methods that allow me to discover vulnerabilities. So what I want to do now is combine everything so that my program can discover XSS vulnerabilities in all pages in a given target website. So let's go to my code, and I'm going to minimize this because I'm not going to care how this works anymore. I've implemented it, I tested it, and I know that these methods work. And I'm going to go back to my run scanner method, the generic method that I said you can use to discover any vulnerability in it once you implement a method to discover that vulnerability. So what we did now is we have methods to discover XSS in links and in forms. And the way we built the run scanner method is that it's going to iterate over all the target links. It's going to extract the forms in them in this particular line. And then it's going to print testing form in this specific link. So what I'm going to say now is I'm going to create a new variable, and I'm going to call this variable is vulnerable to XSS. This variable is going to equal to self.testXSS in form, because right now we're iterating over forms, and I'm going to give my form as the input and the link as the link which contains this form. And then I'm going to test if is vulnerable to XSS. Then I'm going to print a message saying XSS discovered in link. And then we'll also say in the following form. And then I actually want to print the vulnerable form. So basically all I'm doing is I'm using a new variable called is vulnerable to XSS, and I'm setting the value of this to whatever value returned from the method that tests XSS in the form. Now we know this method returns true if the past form contains a vulnerability, otherwise it'll return false. So if this is true, then I'm going to print that it is vulnerable, and I'm going to print the form. Then I'm actually going to do something similar in here. So I'm going to say is vulnerable to XSS is equal to self.testXSS in link, and I'm going to pass it the link as the input. Again, this will return either true or false. If it returns a true value, so if is vulnerable to XSS, then I'm going to print discovered XSS in link. And that's it. So you can see how simple it is now to extend my code to discover any type of vulnerability. The key is to actually write methods to discover that vulnerability, and we can just call these methods in my run scanner. If the method discovers a vulnerability in a form, we can call it here. If it discovers a vulnerability in a link, we can call it here. And that's it. Now what I also want to do is, just before we print that we discovered the vulnerability, I'm just going to add 2 new line characters so it's easy for me to find it in the output. And let's go ahead now to my vulnerability scanner, and I'm going to remove this because we're actually not going to do this anymore. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to crawl, and this is going to build my target list and store all the links in all of the pages in my target website in the target links list. And then I'm going to call the vulnerability scanner dot run scanner to run the scanner and discover the vulnerabilities. And like I said, if you implemented more methods to discover more vulnerabilities, if you put them in the scanner, this will automatically call them. So the code here, as you can see, is very simple, and all of the heavy work will be done in here. So let's go ahead and run the code. I'm going to clear the screen and I'm going to run my code. And perfect. Now if we go up, you can see that the first thing that it was doing is crawling and making a list of all the possible links. Then it was testing these links as normal URLs, and then it discovered an XSS vulnerability in this link, and we actually have tested this link before and we know it is vulnerable, and it's given us the form that is vulnerable to this. Then it's testing another link, and you can see that it discovered another XSS vulnerability that we actually didn't see, and this is actually a stored XSS vulnerability. So whenever it's exploited, it's stored in the web page, and now anyone who visits this web page will actually see this vulnerability. So the code will be executed on their browser. And as you can see, the code is getting executed on my browser because it was injected by this program in here. So again, it's given us the form that is vulnerable, and then it continued testing other links in which it wasn't able to discover any vulnerabilities. So basically right now, we built a program that can be used to automatically discover vulnerabilities into any website. All you have to do is just give it the website, the target. It'll automatically map all the links that exist in this website. It'll automatically extract all the forms. It'll automatically start submitting payloads to discover vulnerabilities and then tell you if this vulnerability exists. So now, like I said, all you have to do is just implement more methods to discover other vulnerabilities other than XSS. Now, in this course, I covered how to discover XSS so that I can use it as an example in here. But I will not be covering any more web application vulnerabilities. The reason for this is because this is a big topic, first of all, and second, if I dive into that, I will need another course. I actually have a full course that shows how to discover and exploit web application vulnerabilities. And once you know how to do that manually, writing this in a program is very, very simple. As you can see, once we understood how XSS works, we were able to write a 3-line method to discover XSS. So the same follows for SQL injections, code execution, local and remote file inclusion vulnerabilities. The way they work is, first of all, you send a payload or a test string, and then you analyze the result. If the result is what you expect, then your target is vulnerable. So basically, you can use the exact same code in here with the exact same template. All you'll have to change is the code that you send in here and maybe some slight other changes. Therefore, if I actually cover it in here, I'll be repeating myself a lot and wasting your time as well. So, if you're interested in the subject of web application hacking and penetration testing, then I highly recommend my website hacking course. And once you do that, you can come back to this program and implement other methods to discover all the vulnerabilities that I show in that course. And this is the main reason why I built the program first, then I showed you how to discover a vulnerability with it, because I wanted to stress the idea that this program is generic and you can use it to discover any type of vulnerability once you understand how that vulnerability works.